So we made a list a while back of the 10 most redneck towns in New Jersey, and instead of getting angry comments from people who were on it, we got angry comments from people who weren't. Guys typing paragraphs from a phone with a cracked screen, furious that their town full of dirt bikes, tarped over boats, and neighbors who've been rebuilding the same Camaros in their driveway since 2010 didn't make the cut. What's interesting about being called a redneck in New Jersey is that it isn't an insult out here. It's a credential. It means you live in one of the few places left that hasn't been paved over, priced out, and turned into a Chipotle with a bad parking situation. Here are more of Jersey's most redneck towns. Different ones, same energy, and if you feel personally attacked this time, that's not an accident. We're starting in the part of New Jersey many of you didn't know had a coastline because it faces the wrong way. Commercial Township is home to Port Norris, and Port Norris was once the oyster capital of the world. I promise that's not something a guy told me at a bar. It's an actual historical designation. At the peak in the 1920s, 80 railroad cars a day were rolling out of here loaded with oysters headed for Philadelphia and New York. Local legend says there were more millionaires per square mile here than anywhere else in New Jersey. Victorian mansions, oyster barons, guys getting rich off a mollusk that looks like a wet sneeze. Then in 1957, a parasite called MSX showed up and killed roughly 90% of the oysters in the Delaware Bay. And the entire economy just died overnight. What's left of the old oyster industry are two villages named Bivalve and Shellpile, which are, respectively, exactly what they sound like. Shellpile is named after the mountains of discarded oyster shells sitting outside the packing houses, some of them several stories tall, white as bone, with gulls screaming over the top of them like it's a landfill for the sea. The combined year-round population of Bivalve and Shellpile is under 50 people. You could fit the whole place in one row of a high school bleacher. Meanwhile, the actual businesses that have survived in Port Norris include a company that manufactures coffin liners whose slogan is "the last mattress you'll ever sleep on." I want you to understand that the town's most successful industry is death-adjacent bedding. And in case you think this place is sleepy, in 2007, state police ran an undercover operation on the local drag racing scene and rounded up 62 people in one night, handing out over 200 summonses and impounding cars. 200 summonses in a township of a few thousand people. Port Norris went from the richest town in the state to one of the poorest towns in the poorest county in the state, and everybody who's still there knows exactly why it happened. There's a restored tall ship down at the wharf, the A.J. Meerwald, which is New Jersey's official tall ship, floating in a town that most of New Jersey has never heard of. Tabernacle, Burlington County, Deep Pine Barrens. Roughly 7,000 people spread across a township that's mostly sand roads, scrub pine, and the specific silence that makes people from Bergen County nervous. The center of civilization here is Nixon's General Store, which has been standing since 1850, sells penny candy by the pound, makes a cheesesteak that people drive out into the woods for, and officially bills itself as the Piney Power Gear headquarters. There's merch, there's an identity. Tabernacle has a brand, and the brand is being a Piney, and they are not apologizing to you about it. Down the road in the middle of nowhere is the Carranza Memorial, honoring Emilio Carranza, the Mexican Lindbergh, who crashed here in 1928 flying home through a thunderstorm. His body was found by locals picking blueberries, which is the most expected outcome in the Pine Barrens. The monument was paid for with pennies donated by Mexican schoolchildren, and every single year, official representatives from Mexico still come to a random clearing in the pines to lay a wreath, while a guy on a quad rips past 200 feet away with absolutely no idea what any of it is about. Recreation out here is Apple Pie Hill, which has a fire tower on top of it and is technically the highest point in the Pine Barrens at a staggering 205 feet. People climb it, People take pictures. On a clear day, you can see the Philly skyline in Atlantic City in the same panorama, which perfectly describes the two ways your life can go if you leave. Everything else is Wharton State Forest, sand roads that all look identical, and the deeply held local belief that if your car gets stuck out there, that's between you and God. Next, Wantage Township, Sussex County. 68 square miles of farmland, hunting land, and men who will drive to Pennsylvania to save $4 on groceries and consider the trip a financial victory. Wantage completely surrounds the borough of Sussex, which means the town wrapped itself around a smaller town like a boa constrictor and has been slowly digesting it for 100 years. But the real attraction here is Space Farm Zoo and Museum in the Beamerville section, which has to be experienced to be understood. It started in 1927 as a general store, gas station, and repair shop run by a guy who trapped predators for the state game department. And it has since evolved into a 100-acre complex containing over 500 live animals. Lions, tigers, jaguars, hyenas, bears, kangaroos for some reason, alongside 11 museum buildings holding 50 antique cars, horse-drawn sleighs, antique dolls, and one of the largest private antique firearms collections in the world. The headliner was Goliath, a Kodiak bear who weighed 2,000 pounds and was, at one point, the largest bear in captivity anywhere on the planet. Goliath died in 1991. But they did not bury Goliath. They stuffed him, and he's still standing in the main hall. And they put his skull upstairs next to other skulls so you can compare, so you can stand there and quietly realize your entire head fits inside one of his eye sockets. The place is currently owned by a sitting New Jersey state senator. That's Sussex County in one sentence. A lawmaker whose day job is a roadside zoo with a taxidermied bear in the lobby. And nobody up there thinks that's strange, because it isn't. Everything else is corn, cattle, Route 23, and a man in Carhartt who started memorizing your plate the second you turned onto his road. Next, Estelle Manor, Atlantic County. Estelle Manor is legally a city. It has 1,668 people in it. It is 50 square miles of woods and swamp with a mayor, and the population is shrinking. It's also crossed by County Route 666, which is real, and which every person who has ever driven it has taken a picture of. The place names inside city limits are a fever dream. There's a section called Russia. There's Head of River, Walker's Forge, Hunter's Mill, Steelman's Landing, and Gibson's Landing. These aren't neighborhoods, they're just spots where somebody once did something and the name stuck. In 1918, Bethlehem Steel came in and built an entire munitions plant here from scratch in under 3 months, along with a whole company town called Belcoville to house the workers, guarded by 1,100 soldiers. $12 million, 24 miles of railroad track, 3 separate shell loading plants. The factory started producing on October 24th, 1918. The armistice-ending World War I was signed on November 11th, 1918. 18 days. They built a city in a swamp, and the war ended before the paint dried. Everybody went home, and the forest just quietly took the entire thing back. Today, it's 1,700 acres of concrete foundations under cedar swamp with a boardwalk running over the ruins so you can stroll above the bones of a town that barely got to be born. Estelle Manor is the only place in New Jersey where the woods are visibly winning a war, and honestly, at this point, the woods are up like 4-0. Next, Knowlton Township, Warren County. Knowlton is what happens when a township drifts so far northwest it starts leaning into Pennsylvania out of embarrassment. 3,000 people. People end up in Knowlton, usually after a divorce, a job that went sideways, or one extremely confident decision made at 34 about what they wanted their life to feel like. And the maddening part is that it works out for them. The guy who quit Bergen County to keep chickens and stop answering emails is genuinely happier than you. and he will communicate that without speaking, just by standing in his driveway holding a coffee, watching you attempt a three-point turn. 6 railroads once ran through this township, and every one of them is gone. What's left is the Pollenskill Viaduct, a concrete railroad bridge in the woods that was, when it was finished in 1910, the largest reinforced concrete structure in the world. Nothing has run on it in decades. It's covered in graffiti and teenagers who are absolutely not supposed to be up there. And it is one of the most beautiful things in this entire state, sitting in the trees, unmarked, and about 4 beers away from a very bad night for somebody's son. Down at the river, the Portland-Columbia pedestrian bridge stands on the piers of the last covered bridge that ever crossed the Delaware, which Hurricane Diane's floodwaters destroyed in August 1955 by shoving it under a railroad bridge and grinding it into splinters. People watched from the hill. They still talk about it. In Knowlton, 1955 is recent. And meanwhile, Interstate 80 cuts straight through the middle of it, and thousands of people a day do 78 miles an hour through this township without ever knowing they were in it. That's Knowlton's entire relationship with America. You're going through at speed, not looking, and they would like to keep it exactly that way. Next, Alloway Township, Salem County. Salem County is the least populous county in New Jersey, and Alloway is 3,300 people of it, a number that has been quietly going down since 2010. This is the Alloway Creek watershed, 75 square miles of it, roughly a fifth of the entire county. Corn, soybeans, wetlands, and 80 miles of road, serving a population that could fit in one high school gym with seats left over. In 1738, Caspar Wistar built the first successful glass factory in the American colonies right here at a spot called Wistarburg. Windows, bottles, flasks, decades before the Revolution. This is legitimately important American industrial history, and it happened in Alloway Township, Salem County, New Jersey. Nothing remains. Not a wall, not a foundation. It's a field, and there's a small marker. There are cows standing on the birthplace of American glassmaking, and they do not care, and neither, at this point, does Alloway. The kids get bussed out to Woodstown High School, which means Alloway is so committed to rural life, it outsources its own teenagers. Friday night, your options are somebody's bonfire, the fair, or driving to the Pole Tavern Circle and back. And the circle counts. The circle is a destination. People make plans around the circle. Next, Pemberton Township, Burlington County. Brown's Mills is the beating heart of Pemberton Township, and the name comes from the fact that the creek water runs brown, stained by tannins leaching out of the cedar swamps. The town is named after the color of its own water, and nobody's ever tried to rebrand it. 100 years ago, this was a resort. Philadelphians came here for the clean pine air and the mineral springs, staying at places like the Pig and Whistle Inn, taking pictures by the lake. There was a tuberculosis sanatorium out here because the air was considered medicinal. That sanatorium eventually became the Deborah Heart and Lung Center, a hospital with a national reputation that sits improbably in the middle of the pines. Then Fort Dix expanded, and Brown's Mills stopped being a resort and became a place where you live if you're stationed at what is now Joint Base McGuire-Dix Lakehurst. 42,000 acres, the only tri-service base in the entire Department of Defense, bigger than the town it borders. So what you get is a very specific American cocktail. Veterans, active duty families, lifelong pineys, and lake communities where the docks are older than the houses. Mirror Lake in July is a water trampoline, 100 kids, 20 coolers, and at least one man deep frying something he shouldn't. Route 530 is a straight shot of muffler shops and dollar stores. 10 minutes east is Whitesbog, where Elizabeth White cultivated the first commercial blueberry in the world in 1916. The Pine Barrens gave the planet the blueberry, and the planet gave the Pine Barrens absolutely nothing back. Next, Waterford Township, Camden County. Waterford is Camden County pretending it isn't Camden County, and mostly getting away with it because the second you cross into the Atco section, you're in the Pinelands, and the vibe changes completely. Atco meant one thing: Atco Dragway. Opened in 1960, the first official drag strip in New Jersey, a quarter-mile of asphalt on 180 acres off Jackson Road, where 3 generations of South Jersey guys learned exactly what their car could do and exactly how much money they didn't have. On July 18th, 2023, without warning, the owners posted on Facebook that Atco Dragway was permanently closed, effective immediately. Season canceled. This was days after they hosted the 29th annual Pan American Nationals, which they described in the same goodbye post as the biggest and best event they'd ever had. Then they turned off the comments. Within 24 hours, the 5,000-seat grandstand was listed online for $390,000. Buyer must remove it quickly. And here's what everyone in Waterford knew was coming. 63 years of drag racing didn't evaporate. It just relocated. It moved onto Route 73, onto the White Horse Pike, onto the long, dark straightaways between Atco and Blue Anchor, where there's no cop and no finish line and no ambulance for 11 minutes. You take away the legal track, the racing doesn't stop, it just gets stupider. The nearest drag strip in New Jersey is now in Warren County. That's a 2-hour drive to do legally what these guys will absolutely do for free at 1 a.m. on a county road. Finally, Lacey Township, Ocean County. Lacey Township's official seal has an atom on it. An atom. Because from 1969 until 2018, this town was built around Oyster Creek, which by the end was the oldest operating commercial nuclear power plant in the United States. It shut down on September 17, 2018, after 49 years. 2 scram buttons, 122 control rods, done. What it left behind is roughly 1.7 million pounds of radioactive waste that is staying in Lacey Township indefinitely because there is nowhere on Earth to put it. Decommissioning runs into 2029. The energy tax money that covered about 1/3 of the town's budget is drying up. And no developer on this planet is putting a shopping center next to a spent fuel cask farm. So what's Lacey now? It's Forked River, which is pronounced Forked. 2 syllables, and locals will correct you with a hostility that seems disproportionate until you realize it's the only thing they get to be pedantic about. It's Lacey Road running east to the bay, past the boat shops, the bait shops, the tattoo shops, and a Wawa parking lot that functions as the town square. It's every 3rd truck having a Barnegat Bay sticker and a gun club decal. It's duck blinds, deer stands, jet skis, and a lifted Silverado idling outside the Dunkin' at 5:40 in the morning. This is a town where you can crab in the morning, hunt in the afternoon, and see the ventilation stack of a dead nuclear reactor from the water while you do both. There is nowhere else like it, and Lacey does not care whether you find that appealing.